Get on with. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Delusions of Grandeur. I am one of your hosts, and tonight we are continuing the superhero extravaganza that we have continued to follow to see exactly what's up in the sky, or shall we say, what's on the ground. So, Dustin, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we have in store for tonight?
Well, on this show, we're going to be talking about the DC Universe movie Shazam, which is, I would say, the first good DCU movie of the current timeline.
What about Wonder Woman and Aquaman? They were good.
I forget Aquaman exists. I don't like them as much as this movie. Like I have willingly rewatched Shazam like 4 or 5 times, and I really feel indifferent to Aquaman. Like it was good, but it kind of like.
Well, I'm a big fan of.
Since everybody's got their camera on.
I'm a big fan of undersea stuff, so that's why I ask. And
Aquaman is pretty.
Aquaman was pretty.
Right.
It was a pretty movie, but I really enjoyed this just so much more.
All three movies had a lot more color to them and a lot more action and life than the first 3 DCU films.
Oh, you think so, huh? Yeah, Wonder Woman was good, but it was kind of grim, like unnecessarily grim in a lot of ways.
I like grim, but I can do fun as well. I'm pretty open as far as like different kind of superheroes things. But this was a good movie though.
Yeah, this was Shazam is kind of a smash up of Spider-Man: Homecoming and Man of Steel, with more so the Spider-Man kind of thrown in there. I think that's probably a pretty good assessment, right?
Yeah, more or less.
People compared it to Big
With a Flash look-alike
film.
Well, there is a direct big homage, but we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Which,
there's an animated Justice League homage.
Yeah, and that was something that I think, well, for sure that would help attract people that didn't know the character already, but it also, it gave a bit of a more of a precedent, but it also does set Shazam as a character set, and always has set him apart from like any other comic book character, because he is just a kid still, even though he looks like this, man mountain, and is actually more powerful than Superman, and does not have the weakness to kryptonite. At the end of the day, he is still a kid, and it's like, there's something pretty cool about that. And his power is derived from magic, which is another weakness of Superman's. And so, but again, it's his maturity and his resourcefulness that is kind of comes into question.
All right.
Now, little known to the public, Shazam actually had a seasonal television run in 1974. Except it was more on the Sid and Mary Croft Brady Bunch kind of a thing. So
yeah, I've heard a little bit about it, and it seems like basically Billy and some old guy drive around in a van and like fight crime occasionally. It's like, oh, this small town we're in this week has some sort of problem. And then Shazam will show up.
That's pretty common, I think, for shows of that time period, because keep in mind that the Incredible Hulk TV show, Bruce Banner was always mobile, and much like the Hulk in the comics, he very rarely stayed in one place, because he was usually on the run. But just a little backstory. So Shazam was known as Captain Marvel before Marvel's Captain Marvel. and that's its whole other topic of conversation. But Captain Marvel debuted in the 40s in the comics through Fawcett Comics, which was a smaller competing comics company to DC Comics, and then eventually to what was Timely Comics, but eventually became Marvel. And he basically was their Superman equivalent, except obviously he was a kid, and the different powers that derive from magic, etc. When he started to outsell Superman, DC sued Fawcett Comics, and they won. And so Shazam, Captain Marvel was taken off of the newsstands for quite a while until DC bought Fawcett Comics, and they were able to integrate their characters into the larger DC canon. But then by that point, Marvel had become a force to be reckoned with, and their Captain Marvel, not Carol Danvers, but Marvel, who they changed to a woman in the movie. But doesn't matter. But yeah, that the different iterations of Marvel's Captain Marvel had come along, and so by that time, when DC was trying to reintroduce their Captain Marvel, to avoid any trouble, they changed. They brought him back like kind of intermittently. He was never like a mainstay like he was in the 40s, but they would bring him back every now and again. But to avoid any confrontation, his name was Captain Marvel. It's still in the comics, but they changed the title of his series to Shazam. And then eventually, like I want to say, as recent as the New 52, or maybe a little bit before, they officially changed his name to Shazam just to avoid any other lasting problems or potential problems. And then by that point, Shazam as a character was more definitively he was made much more clearly distinct from Superman, largely because again the emphasizing the fact that he is a kid, and has the maturity level of a kid and all that stuff. But and they also gave Billy Batson more of a edge to his origin, which obviously the movie takes after. But also just emphasizing the fact that his powers do derive from magic, and he doesn't have the kryptonite weakness and the usual elements of Superman. So all those things, they were able to differentiate them into very clearly different characters, but they nonetheless would battle many times over the course of comics and various related media.
Interesting enough. Interesting enough. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, that's the general history. I believe this was Dustin's pick. Did you want to do your like the brief run through of the plot of the actual film?
I'm like collating it in my head.
Okay.
So it has a bit of a different start to a lot of superhero movies, where you get kind of the you have been chosen for this great power moment, and you will be tested. And then you see what happens when somebody actually fails the test.
You're not worthy.
And it kind of ruins this guy. It kind of ruins this guy's life, which was already not great. So, the villain is called to be Shazam as a child, but he fails the test. And when he's returned, his dad gets in a car accident.
Interesting enough, it starts in 1974. So,
yeah. So you see kind of the villain's. You see the villain's motivation many years before the events of the film.
Right.
And I thought that was a pretty cool way to open it up.
And that's
really
Dr.
Savannah.
And that's Dr. Thaddeus Savannah, who was Savannah, and it was considered to be one of Shazam's major adversaries in the comics, and the other of which will eventually get his own spin-off movie, the other of which is more the anti-hero Black Adam, who's sort of like the,
evil
if
Shazam.
Shazam is Goku, if Shazam is Goku, then Black Adam's like Vegeta. But yeah, it's
More
that's still
Frieza,
worthy
from
of
what I
putting out.
understand.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
more
or
the.
maybe like
Yeah.
Venom. How like for the most part they're enemies, but every now and again,
I mean,
Well, yeah,
again, it depends on who writes him because he has
right,
been right evil at some parts
right.
in his
I've
in the
I've only
comic.
known Black Adam to be evil.
Well,
Yeah.
to bring it back home a little bit to the DC universe, from what I understand, it's not dissimilar from Green Lantern and Sinestro because you had basically someone who started one way and kind of went evil later
So
on.
wasn't that one the guy? Wasn't Black Adam the one they referred to when they said they had somebody they chose earlier, but he
Yes, I believe
used it
so.
for revenge? So that's
It had to be him, yeah.
Well,
But
and basically it opens up the fact that different people have possessed this power and done different things with it,
right,
and that that others besides even Billy Batson can
mhm,
do good as well as evil with it.
right. And speaking of Billy, basically this kid who can't stay in a foster home because he's obsessed with tracking his
Yep.
mother he was separated from when he was a child. So it's kind of he's introduced as sort of this snarky, kind of good kid, but a smartass. And I love the
Yeah,
part where he tricks the cops into that building and traps them while he uses their scanner.
and that's
That was fun.
definitely taking after the New 52 iteration of Billy Batson, where he's a bit more of like a delinquent who's not like a bad kid per se, but he's just kind of lost in his way, and so therefore, him being Shazam allows him to. It's more so the twist on the origin is instead of the usual traditional origin of like the most pure in heart person gets this power that partially it's because well they're running out of options, but also partially it's because he kind of has to earn the right to call himself a hero, and that's why you see him with his montage of trying to figure out what his powers are and kind of enjoying the prestige of it all. But eventually he does really.
Before we get
Go ahead.
too far into the plot line, let us get Dustin's first impressions.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I guess we're because normally I try to give like a complete breakdown of the movie, but I think that's maybe a little too much sometimes, and we get overloaded and go over time. So I guess let's just get back to the basics with first impressions on this. So I had heard that this movie was pretty good, but I was kind of like, it's a DC movie, I don't know. So I was actually kind of hesitant to watch this, same as I was with Aquaman. And then the first time I saw it, it was like, wow, this is great. Why couldn't they just do this the entire time? Like, why weren't the rest of them like this? God. Like,
well, I mean, they were trying to
blew me away.
differentiate, I suppose.
Oh, they were trying to do their like grim and gritty tone, which I mean, that worked for Batman when he was being directed by Tim Burton, and that worked for Chris Nolan to a degree. But
In other words, for Batman.
not for the rest. Not for the rest of. Not trying to do it for every one of DC's characters, because I'm used to the DC characters from the Justice League cartoon show. So that's kind of that's my impression of what everybody in that universe is like. And Batman as a grim character was scaled down in that series, and so that's kind of the tone I expected from Justice League characters when they got their DCU movies. And so Man of Steel was okay, and then Batman versus Superman is just maybe the worst superhero movie that exists. Well,
there are so many worse ones than that.
There is Ang Lee's Hulk. You are correct.
That was
I
better
like
than
it.
Batman v Superman.
I like Ang Lee's Hulk. I think it does things that are different from other superhero films.
It's different, all right.
Takes a lot of risks. It takes a lot of like thematic and stylistic risks that a lot of people haven't done since then. But
There's a
I
reason
mean,
why.
you guys haven't seen Rise of the Black Bat, which is hands down, I think, the worst superhero film I've ever seen. But I also haven't seen. I have not watched The Amazing Bulk yet. And,
I was about to say, okay, there's The Amazing Bulk. Like if we're gonna be, I'm talking about real movies. The Amazing Bulk does not count. He's
yes,
too
it
bad.
does. It does count. But I mean, in terms of like big budget movies, I could name a ton more that are worse than Batman v Superman by far. Like X-Men Origins Wolverine's one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, that one's pretty awful.
Yeah,
I never really. I don't really get the hatred for some of the DCU that some people have, but
yeah,
I don't.
well, I don't either, but
Neither do I.
Okay.
largely
Suicide Squad was probably worse. I'll concede that Suicide Squad was probably worse.
Yeah,
I liked Suicide Squad, but I also would have preferred David Ayer's darker cut. You know, because I assumed that was the change in tone. I assume was part of what people didn't like about it, but also
Poor editing.
you know the
horrible writing.
I liked the way that
which I'm sure after. Which I'm sure after we get the fan Snyder cut, I'm sure people will be on the bandwagon to see the David Ayer
my
cut.
lord!
I hope so. I mean, well, it's weird because like the way that the first half of the movie was edited, like it was really trippy, like an acid trip, and I was like, I kind of wanted the whole movie to be like that, just because I love Natural Born Killers, and it reminded me of that. And I thought that's a good good style to take for these psychotic characters, and so that's part of what had me. But
and they took a little bit more of that tone with Birds of Prey.
Birds of Prey was great.
Like,
everything
Shazam
about
was something that
so well.
Shazam was something that kind of signaled the fact that they could be a little bit more colorful and more joyous without necessarily having to copy Marvel, which was the big problem with Joss Whedon's reshoots of Justice League, is that they just felt a little too Marvel-ish, and so that's why I'm hoping with the Zack Snyder cut that people will be able to see the trajectory of his you could even call it like a Superman trilogy, because that's like the character who anchors those series, because you could see where it was going, that Superman basically is figuring out his place in the world, and does he even is it even right for him to be the savior of the world, basically? And then by the time that we get to Man of Steel, he'll have really earned that place, and so hopefully we'll be able to realize that. But with Shazam, they were able to be a little bit more colorful, a little bit more fun.
I'd kind of forgotten about. I had forgotten about Justice League, so I kind of take that back. Like, Batman Superman isn't the worst one. Like, it's gotta be Justice League then. But notice how, like, as we name DC titles like Suicide Squad, Batman vs Superman, Justice League, notice how they're all DCU titles that are in the running for the word. Like, budget
I think there are two. DC, arguably three DC ones that are not part of the DCU that are always thrown forward. At least four that are always thrown forward for this list. Green Lantern, which personally I didn't dislike, but it was not great.
I didn't dislike it either.
Okay.
I've never gotten around to watching all of Batman and Robin, but what I saw made me very, very sad. And I have not yet tackled Catwoman and Jonah Hex, but I've heard they're both pretty awful.
You forgot Steel.
I like Catwoman.
I've never seen that one either.
You forgot Steel.
Most people forgot that.
There's this YouTube series called Caravan of Carnage, and I forgot they did one on Steel.
Yeah.
I want to see
that's
all these one day eventually.
well. My point in bringing all this up is because whenever people say, "Oh, such and such was the worst movie ever," I'm like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can rattle them off, and it's like it's like just
yeah.
priorities, people. But
Speaking
I
of,
think
let's get back to first impressions.
yeah, I'm trying to get us back there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Dane, what was yours? What was
Um,
your first perspective of this film, Dane?
Well, I had a little bit of exposure to Shazam, the character, through he had some appearances in Justice League Unlimited where he had a good fight with Superman that I had talked about before, but I was never supremely entrenched in the character, but I went into this. I saw it in the theater. I saw it a little late. Like it was still playing, but it was not like opening weekend or anything. I want to say it was like late May. One of the last movies I remember actually seeing in the theater. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I was kind of I think having Zachary Levy playing or Levy Levy having him play the adult Shazam. I think his was an interesting choice because his costume was such that it kind of had all the definition for him, and yet his face was kind of thin, so he wasn't. He clearly didn't get in shape for the role, but in a way, it's that kind of mismatched body with the head that kind of sets him apart from traditional comic book Shazam, but also it does kind of sell the idea that he's a boy in a grown up's body, and so that was kind of interesting. Plus,
They really nailed
it
that
was
look, yeah.
they did, but also he really seemed to get the tone of what they were going for. For me personally, I would have because I like Big the movie, but it's not like my go-to necessarily. Like I have plenty of other movies I go to over that, but I get their rooting
Don't even
themselves in that.
compare Big to this movie.
Well, I mean, it's pretty. I think it's a pretty worthy comparison, at least in
Thematic
terms of
overlap. Like I would.
yeah. Well,
So,
thematic overlap, tone, things like that. But for me, like one thing that I was kind of wanting more from this movie, which I'm hoping that with the second one that we do get this, I would like to see a more mythologically focused story because I think that that is something that, well, DC as a universe, their characters are very mythological, whereas Marvel's more or less, with some exceptions, but for the most part, they tend to be more scientific and more like science fiction and things like that. Even they're more fantastical characters, but DC, their characters are very godlike, very mythological, and as far as like the grim tone or whatever, like something like Injustice. Well, Injustice, Gods Among Us, that already kind of.
I would argue that
Pat
the whole
nailed that. Like,
I would argue that
that's
Batman
what I'm.
was all about the science.
Well, yeah, he's a.
What was that,
But
Jay?
he's a. Batman is a very much an outlier in terms of the rest of the.
Yeah,
So think about it. Superman is an alien. He's a Kryptonian. Wonder
right.
Woman's an Amazonian. Aquaman is an Atlantean. The Green Lantern, well, depends on which one, but they tend to be
Right.
normal people that are chosen with these amazing powers, and the only limits their
Alien power.
imagination.
Yeah.
Batman is just a guy who happens to be wealthy, and that's really it. So
I
he
mean,
is
there's a little more
definitely.
to it than that.
Well, yeah,
Well,
but
I'm
they
saying
also
in terms
There's
of
more
like,
to it than that.
I'm saying in terms of his power set and or lack thereof, and in terms of
He's a
like his
child
overall
who
like.
witnessed it.
and in the New 52, they kind of play on that. They kind of have a running joke, mostly Green Lantern. They have a running thing where Green Arrow is trying really, really hard to be part of the Justice League, and they keep going, we already have a Batman.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Like, I'm saying more so in terms of their species and their status in their particular environments, because you got kings and princesses or queens. You've got, the Green Lanterns are essentially,
Yeah.
well, and they're essentially like space cops, the Green Lantern.
Mhm.
Yeah, then you don't have as many, like what they referred to in the theatrical cut of Justice League as the accidentals, like Flash and Cyborg, are some of the few that DC has on that level. But point being that with Shazam, like he's explicitly mythological, and I would have liked to have seen more of a focus on the mythological side. And I'm hoping that with the universe established, with the character established, that once we get to Black Adam, that we'll get there. Because I really love the statues of the seven deadly sins. I love that they did explain the rooting of why the word Shazam is what it is, because it's part and parcel with his powers, because they're all descended from the elders of old. And I think that was all good. I would have just liked more of that kind of thing, but for what it was going for, I think it definitely hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
All right.
What about you, Brandon?
Well, of course, this
We
is
haven't
not
heard from you.
I know this isn't my first time. I didn't get to see it in theaters like I wanted to. It's it's one of those, like the DC universe, with the Man of Steel. One of these days we'll have to go back to talk about that and probably do Superman 2 at the same time. I feel like those kind of run side by side, believe it or not. I had felt like, okay, so we're gonna try and do this like dark and gritty thing for everything, which is the Zack Snyder answer to Marvel. And I was just like, okay, this is okay. I felt like that for the most part. I didn't have any dislike for any of them, including Suicide Squad. I just didn't have any like love for them until we hit Wonder Woman. And after Wonder Woman, I felt like the DC universe started to hit its stride. It started to find its place. And I mean, I really liked Wonder Woman. Aquaman was very enjoyable. And I actually felt like they were better than some of the Marvel movies out there, especially better than the second Thor movie, for instance.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And, then, of course, Shazam. I was the only one, apparently, that was interested in it. I couldn't even get my wife to see it the second time. I was watching it. But I guess it's because of it looks like it's too much of a kid's movie if you look at it on the surface. But I was excited about it because I was looking for the more hopeful tone. And I think that was the thing that really gets lost with the DC universe, is that a lot of the characters are larger than life, are hopeful. That's something that I think the CW gets right, that the DCU usually falls flat on its face with. And that's one of the things that I'm glad that they seem to have gotten well in Shazam. Right. So to me, it was a really good movie. It satisfied the need there. It wasn't my favorite because, again, my favorite in the DCU is Wonder Woman, but it was definitely better than what came before it.
Right. Right.
Well, and my going into this is I actually watched Zachary Levi in Chuck, where he played a secret agent that was in a gaming store. And he was kind of like a James Bond-ish kind of thing, and I enjoyed his humor in the series. In fact, I followed it until its end. And when he took up the role of Shazam, now I didn't get to see this in the theater, but I loved his comedy. I mean, the fact that he could play the vulnerable young man that he is deep down, and I like the story that you got all these castaways that you begin to see a little bit of a storyline behind some of them. I mean, as the story progresses, and it somewhat becomes more about them as the film progresses, even though it kind of focuses on the story
of Billy. Yeah, even
the
the
young
background,
man who, yeah.
even the background characters, like you're right, they eventually come to the forefront, and they're not just like cheap throwaways. Like everybody has something going on.
Right.
Well, and that
and
ties
after I
into
watched this again,
Go ahead.
After I watched this again, at first I thought they were slammed together in the end, but as I watched it, I mean, each one of them had like their different characteristics, and I liked that, and the fact that all of them were vulnerable in some way, shape, or form, and that's what I liked about it. And then when it came together about the unity of the family unit, that's what I really liked about this film.
Oh yeah. Well, that reinforces with the something in the comics, which is the Marvel family, how in servicing those themes of family, that they got to reinforce it with the idea of Billy Batson's foster family, and they are able to be as extraordinary as he is, and those adult actors, I thought they actually did a really good job of portraying the same kid characters, but grown up bodies. Like they did a really good job of that. But yeah, I thought I didn't expect to see that, honestly, but I was really glad that I did, because well, A, it furthered the themes, but B, it was a very good homage to the comics. And also another good homage to the comics is whenever Billy would have to transform into Shazam, and he like if he ever needed like an adult around and there wasn't one, then he could transform and cover his costume or whatever. But that was also in the comics, where in his adult form he would wear clothes over his costume, and he could get an apartment in his name, and things that a kid couldn't do. So he was basically able to be self-sufficient because he was his own parent, basically, at least physically. So
they had a lot of fun with that in this one. Especially I would like some beer, please.
Oh yeah,
some of your finest beer.
Well, and I read a it was a Paul Dini and illustrated by Alex Ross. It was one of those series of there were 4 of them, I think. There was a Superman one, a Batman one, a Wonder Woman one, and a Shazam one from the 90s, I want to say. They were like these massively huge, but not all that long stories that were, of course, beautifully painted by Alex Ross, and they were all focused on the various themes of their respective characters. And I read the Shazam one after having seen the movie, because it was on display, because the movie was new. It was in a used media store around here, and I read it because it was very short, and I was able to read it. And I think that they that thing, like, it was more so about Shazam being able to like inspire a lot of sick children and things like that, which that is a very prescient theme in his character in the comics, and you definitely get some flavor of that here, especially like at the very end when he's able to appear to the students in the school, which is pretty cool. And it's something that does also kind of set him apart, because unlike Superman, who has always been different, even though he has tried his best to emulate human life and behavior, he's never ever going to fully be like us. Whereas Billy Batson has always been one of us. He just happens to have been given this great power. So that is what makes him unique. Plus, what you had said, David, when we did the when we did Superman that anyone can put on the cape. Well, in this case, it's a little bit more accurate to not only Billy Batson but to the rest of the Marvel family, because in that respect, not only is it the family, not only is it the family themes that get reinforced, but also the idea that anybody can be this great heroic figure if they have that power of belief and everything, which is ultimately what makes Shazam a different character from Superman, who that's really the whole point of his character, is that he is a symbol of that, but at the end of the day, he's supposed to be the last of his kind. So definitely an important distinction to be made there.
Right. And
Nick, what were your first
well, this
impressions?
film has kind of a couple of interesting parallels with Darkman. One is that I had fairly little interest in it prior to the release for somewhat different reasons, but partly of course, Darkman had been an original character. In this case, it's a character that I just never really got into. I never really cared that much for Shazam. I've read some New 52 with Dr. Savannah, and I've read a very little bit with Shazam. And I very much enjoyed Shazam's part in the Injustice story, mainly because Harley had some sort of weird crush on him and called him Shazzy. And when she and Hippolyta and Shazzy all had to work their way out of hell, and they got out simply because Harley was too insane to stay dead. I just enjoyed that whole sequence immensely.
Shazam also functioned as kind of the conscience of the Injustice League.
Right. Well, yeah, and in Injustice, he kind of tried to be. He was going along like a little puppy dog, following Superman and Wonder Woman, and then when he spoke up, it was kind of, he kind of started doubting. And then, of course, Zeus zapped him into hell, and so that was kind of that. But,
and that was always the role that he played in Justice League Unlimited when he appeared. That was always what made him stand out, was that because he had the mind of a child, obviously, he was able to not be encumbered by this kind of cynicism that would accompany, most adults, and certainly not someone like Batman, who in that show, because he, not only that, but because he was by far and away the least powerful out of all of these various superpowered people. He basically, a friend of mine at the time, he described Batman's role in that show as basically Big Brother Batman, and basically he has to like keep tabs on everyone else, and makes sense because he's got to have contingency plans, of course. But that's definitely what makes him stand out, is that he is the heart, but also the fact that he is unencumbered by those various forms of cynicism, that he's able to, in some ways, think more clearly than even the adults can. So,
now, of course, cynicism is one of the reasons I did not see this in theaters, because I was a little gun shy after the other DCEU ones. This did come out on the tail of Aquaman, which I did see in theaters, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh yeah.
It was more a question of timing. And like Brandon said, no one wanted to go see it. The thing is, he always wants to go to the matinee, which I can never do because of work. So that's why I didn't end up seeing it. But I did eventually see it, and this was actually my second viewing, getting ready for this one. And I very much enjoy it. It's a fun movie. I do feel like I would put it almost on par with Aquaman out of the DCU, and I do like Wonder Woman better. I do think that the three of them show some promise, tremendous promise to be had. And I do think, like, the whole idea of him representing hope, I like this idea. I was reading in the comments for this, I'm well versed in the idea of the 7 deadly sins and the 7 heavenly virtues. All 7. And also the if anyone gets around to watching Umineko for next week, that it does feature personification of the 7 deadly sins. And of course, Full Metal Alchemist did. So I've seen these treated before, but I'm less familiar with the 8th of each one. But apparently in Orthodoxy, there's an 8th, and the 8th virtue is hope. So I like the idea that he was, and the 8th sin is despair, which Savannah really does show that in a lot of ways. He does show envy as well, which is why that was the last one he released.
I thought they did a good job. They did a really good job with envy being his kind of main thing.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And they, in general, I did like. I think it was Billy who made the comment. What Lust would have looked.
We should make clear. So for Shazam as a character, well, the wizard's name is Shazam, but the word is derived from the wisdom of Solomon. That's the S. The strength of Hercules, the stamina of Atlas, the power of Zeus, the courage of Achilles, and the speed of Mercury. And so from there you get Shazam, and that also
got it from
signals. Yeah, well, and it also
I saw a parody once where the word was screw paws, and it was like S is for it's been so long I can't remember.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of
the.
I think that's one of the more awesome aspects of Shazam as a character. That, well, the word is it's a magic word. And also within the magic word is the elders, the old ones that he's getting his powers from, but then also the different letters, they signal what those powers are, and he can be anywhere doing anything, and all he has to do is say the word, and that lightning can come and transform him, and so he doesn't have to worry about, like, out of all the because do you ever think about like how long it takes for certain superheroes to change out of their civilian clothes into their superhero costumes? Like the ones that would take the quickest amount of time would be, well, Superman, obviously, because of super speed, the Flash, Venom, or any symbiote character, because of their clothes become the costume. Shazam, because of lightning. The Fantastic Four pretty much always wear their costumes just around the Baxter Building, so that doesn't really count. But it's like
this is my day wear.
Pretty much, yeah. But it's like the one that I always like with Batman, he still has to physically change out. Like if he's wearing a version that can fit under his clothes, or if in the movies it's like a whole, like that would take forever to get on. Plus, then you think about like even Spider-Man, doesn't matter if it's the Stark suit or just a normal suit, it still takes him quite a while to get it in and out of it. And that was always one of my favorite things about Spider-Man, is that sometimes if you're trying to change your clothes quickly, it can be kind of a hassle. So that the ability to quick change, I think, is most certainly a plus, as well as the fact that the lightning bolt that transforms him is in and of itself quite powerful, and it can damage things around it, and and in the case of Justice League Unlimited,
he's in
his attack. Yeah, and that's the thing with that fight between him and Superman in Justice League Unlimited. He uses it as an attack, and it hurts Superman pretty bad.
Well, like in this one where he calls the bolt down on Envy, that was actually a pretty fun little thing there. I do want to mention you were talking before about paying homage to stuff. A couple things here. One, the fact that they never settle on his name was a direct homage to that whole history you talked about with the character and the rights and everything. So I like that. And also, Captain Sparkle Fingers.
That is not my name. Does not represent me.
I also like the fact that, as I think we've discussed before, George Miller tried for a while to do a Justice League movie. Apparently, the guy that was cast as Flash was Adam Brody, and he plays the adult, like the Shazam equivalent, Freddy. And then DJ Catrona was, I think, supposed to play Superman. And he is the one who plays the adult version of Pedro. So that was kind of cool that they brought them in for that. And speaking of casting, we got to talk about Mark Strong as Savannah. He does a great job. He makes Savannah. That was a fun role for him, I
He
think.
makes him a really cool character.
Oh, yeah.
Like, just that scene where he walks into the boardroom and just like wrecks everyone. Especially that thing with his brother.
Wonderful cameo. I should have recognized this guy. I recognized him, but I should have recognized him. His father is played by John Glover, who, yes, was in Smallville, which I've never seen. But he also voiced the Riddler on Batman the Animated Series.
Oh, really?
And yes, but yes.
Yeah, he was Dr. Woodrow in there, which was Swamp Thing
Dr. Woodrow in the Swamp Thing series.
Oh,
of course,
he was Dr. Woodrow.
He seemed really familiar.
Dr. Woodrow.
Of course,
he was
the main
Dr.
thing I
Woodrow
would have
in
recognized.
Batman and Robin.
Yeah. The main thing I actually recognized him from was he had a one-episode appearance, a very notable episode on Frasier. But again, he was the Riddler in the animated series, so that was a great callback to that. But Mark Strong has a long comic history. He played the villain in Kick-Ass. He played Sinestro in Green Lantern. He played a good guy in the Kingsman movies. So he's becoming a go-to guy for these kind of films. And
I've been watching. Sorry. Go finish.
Well, I was going to say, not to mention the villain in Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes, but he's becoming.
I liked him in the Brothers Grimm. I think he was in the Brothers Grimsby. Yeah, I liked him in that movie.
Right.
I was gonna say, speaking of villains and being cast as a villain, I've been watching the Fly collection from Shout Factory, and there's a lot on here about how Vincent Price got typecast into villain roles pretty quickly, and it's just making me think of that. So
he did have an assortment of roles, and I've seen a couple where I'm like, "That's Vincent Price."
I thought one thing that's interesting with this string of movies, I call it the after Snyder DCU. I mean, if Zack Snyder had not had the tragedy going and he had still maintained total control over the DCU, would Shazam really have been possible? I mean, can you imagine Shazam and even the main character as this dark, brooding, always depressed kid who is this angry, dark, depressed Shazam in a colorless world?
This movie had such a dark, sad moment, like when he finally does find his mom and finds out that like she didn't want him. Zack Snyder could not have done anything darker than that. So I would.
I was gonna say, like,
Zack Snyder.
I wouldn't, discount. I wouldn't discount
he would have done it in slow-mo and made it very dark and gritty and all washed of color.
That's one reason why I don't think
he would have done it. He would have done it visually, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I feel like the dark moments in here shouldn't be discounted as well as the lighter moments in the other films. Because I think that there are more of both than we think. I mean, I agree with you that moment was very sad, and I mean that at its core, that is what defines Billy Batson as a character. That he's going to seek meaning from something outside of himself, thinking that that's going to solve all his problems, and it doesn't. If anything, it just muddies the waters even more, and so he has to really earn the right to be a hero, but also
and he gets quite cocky for a little bit.
Well, in a sense, it actually I would say more than muddying the waters, it almost crystallizes things a little bit, because basically that's the moment when he has spent the whole film desperately seeking his mother and pushing away this family that wants to take him in. And he finally finds her because they found her. And he went on their information. And I believe as he turned away, he had something like, I think he said something like, I have a family now, or something like that. I don't remember exactly what he said, but I feel like he said something to that effect.
Back to my real family.
Yes, I think that was it.
He gives her the compass that she gave him before. You know, it's been like this big meaningful thing in his life, and she doesn't. You're right, and she doesn't even remember. Just what's this? Something I think you need more than me.
I think it was a darker moment, an overall more hopeful, lighter tone. Whereas I think that if it was done the other way, there would have been maybe a slightly lighter moment and an overall darker tone.
Right.
Which is, that's. I think that would be the major difference. I mean, Aquaman would be the one I think would be.
It's all.
You know, there's a remix
kind of speculative at this point.
There's a remix of that High Hope song where it's tuned down really low.
Actually, I do have one example.
Like we'd get like a horribly, even more depressing version of that scene.
Right.
I think that there is a good example of how Zack Snyder would have handled something like this, as opposed. It really would have been Aquaman would be the best one. Because you can see how he handles Aquaman and the Justice League. You can see the ocean. It feels more polluted, more lifeless, kind of less. What's the word? There's nothing there as much. It's very pale. Whereas in Aquaman, it's probably one of the most colorful movies out there. That's one I can say, because I can almost guarantee you that same, like, almost lifeless, darker, less colorful tone would have been used for that movie, which might have been the original intention. But again, I am very curious because I like this new set of more hopeful films that are surrounded more by optimism, with maybe moments of darkness within them, as opposed to surrounded by darkness with moments of optimism within them.
Or here's a good example of, I think this is one that, Brandon, I'm sure this is right up your alley, because I'm sure you probably, of all people, you probably absolutely loved that extended montage of him getting the handle on his powers was set to Queen. And it was what, Don't Stop Me Now? But if it was Zack Snyder, it probably would have been set to Bohemian Rhapsody. So
there probably wouldn't have been any Queen at all. It would have been like dramatic orchestra music.
But another good example,
imagine something hacky and overdone, and that's what it would have been.
Or maybe Marilyn Manson covering "Don't Stop Me Now" or something like that.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. One thing I want to point out is, did anybody notice this was by New Line Cinema?
Yeah.
And it had a real kind of horror tone to it in a lot of places.
That's what we need, is like Shazam taking on Freddy Krueger or something like that.
That's what New Line does now.
I think we had a direct Freddy on it. I know
cool.
Annabelle,
that's what New Line
appears
does
on
now.
a shelf somewhere in one of the backgrounds, and I think we actually had an intentional Freddy callback. One of the demons flicks its fingers out into claws.
Annabelle was in Aquaman.
Yeah,
she was at the bottom of the ocean, and
nice.
I think as far as it's a little useless to. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I read that the set designer wanted the toy store to have Lex Luthor toys, and they said it would be distasteful to have that in the film. So it's interesting that they snuck in Annabelle, but not Lex Luthor.
Well, I mean,
I understand, because that wouldn't make sense. Well, but I think it's kind of a useless endeavor to what would Zack Snyder have done, or what would this be or that be? It's a good example of that is Zack Snyder, like Michael Bay, like other like really visual directors, they come from the world of commercials and music videos, and so that's where their brains are at. And at that point, then it becomes, well, who's writing it? And because like you compare Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead to other ones that came later, and his Dawn of the Dead was written by James Gunn, and you can tell on the script level that that's totally James Gunn. But visually, it looks spectacular because that's what Zack Snyder does best. So, if it was something that he wrote or had a hand in writing, then that would be one thing. But it's one of those things where he's primarily there for his distinctive eye and being able to communicate things in the course of one image or a series of images, which at the end of the day, that is what the film medium is. So I think that we shouldn't discount that. And I think a lot of people do to their detriment, because that clearly means that they don't really know what the film medium is or what it does. But it's something that they were getting other directors on board before he had to depart Justice League and then eventually the DCEU as a whole. So, I mean, for all we know, it could very well have turned out the same way. But it's this film was done by Daryl F. Sandberg, who had done Lights Out, which was a good horror film. And I do find that kind of amusing. The horror filmmakers that then transition to superheroes and like how they bring their flavor to it,
Right.
and like James Wan having done Aquaman, and even though it wasn't The Conjuring, it wasn't Insidious, and it wasn't Saw, but at the same time, like when you go down to the deep ocean, those creatures, it's like, yeah, like those, like that alone, plus that final battle, I was like, I think this looks awesome. And it's again, I love the ocean. I love having grown up in Monterey, California. I have a deep love of the ocean, and especially the deep ocean, like with the anglerfish and things like that. So I mean, that had me right away. But then here with Lights Out, Daryl F. Sandberg, that visually speaking, Shazam even had some things that looked like they might have come out of Lights Out, as far as especially like the fight scenes at night and things like that. You could see some of that same touch. But yeah, I think that it's one of those things where like people often underestimate what certain creative people can do with a property, and it's usually I don't ever like to do that. I like to give them a chance, and that's usually when they surprise you. And because like Jon Favreau doing Iron Man, what? And then people see it, oh, it was great. I really don't like that kind of judging things before it comes out kind of attitude. Yeah, it's but you see what I mean, though. It's like we can speculate on that all day long, but at the end of the day, what matters is on the screen, and oftentimes it's those people that you don't think that can do it that can really surprise you. And that's what I always hold out for. And I'm always there to defend Zack Snyder for what he does well, because what he does well, he does better than just about anybody working today. And
there were a couple of moments. There were a couple of moments in this film where they really did show a good grasp on visuals. There were like some of the fights were well choreographed and whatever. But one of my favorite moments actually was like it was just a sudden look at reality, if you will. You had that scene where Savannah and Shazam are chasing each other through the air. And then Shazam kind of ducks out of the way, and Savannah looks around. Oh, there he is. And then just starts monologuing. And then you see how far, and Shazam's like, I can't hear you. What?
Yeah.
I can't hear you, right? What are you doing, man?
I don't.
We should do favorites, because there are so many favorites. We'll probably have to skip a bunch of segments because of the nature of this particular kind of show
Right.
that we're doing today for Shazam. But we got to cover favorites because there is so much just to totally love in this movie.
Right. And again, on Dave's point, Zachary Levi definitely sold it. He did a really good job of playing a kid in an adult's body. And he had some really great, that was one of them. Another great moment was in the convenience store where these dudes are trying to rob it and they fire the gun and it doesn't hurt him. He's like, I'm bulletproof. And he's like just ecstatic. And he just like,
he's like, wait, is you bulletproof or are you bulletproof? Shoot him in the face. Yeah, what?
I had one thought on that, though. I always thought that the child himself felt like the only problem that it came across with for me on the thing is nothing really against the acting, is that it felt like the child when he was actually in his child form was much more mature emotionally and mentally than he was as Shazam as an adult. So it was kind of, I did feel like there was kind of a mismatch there, but not a huge one. But I felt like it was enough for me to notice because I didn't see any example of him acting quite as naive, quite as that when he was a child. Matter of fact, he was kind of like one of those, what do they call it? Street smart. He seemed to be much more knowledgeable as a child than he was as an adult, which was interesting.
I think I can.
I don't know. I think that police incident. I mean, most children, most street smart children, would not try to lock any policeman in a fucking convenience store.
Well, hey, I was like, hey, realistic police
lunch on top of it.
Realistic police excellency, but realistically,
yeah. I think in both ways, he probably is depicted as being fairly, relatively clever and what have you. As an adult, you could put part of that into just the excitement of the whole thing and the fact that this is something that's new and he's never done before. And so anytime you're that excited about things, you tend to, you
let loose.
You let loose a little bit. That's a good way to put it. And the others in the family make the very good observation that the way him and Freddie argue is the same whether they're kids or adults. they go,
they can figure it out.
Like they said, an old married couple. It was pretty good.
You figured it out, and I didn't have to tell. And it's like, you're adorable.
I love the little girl. Yeah. She was an excellent character to have in there. That moment in the school where she's sitting there and she goes over to hug their brothers.
It was like almost like an overdone, like adorable child thing, but it wasn't like you didn't go like, ugh. It was like, oh.
Yeah, it's really a fine line because kids in movies can be insufferable if they're annoying or whatever.
Definitely.
But the favorite moments, I think the part that I expected to see the least, like there were certain things that I knew were coming, like obviously just seeing the whatever it is, the Rock of Eternity or his Rock of Eternity, anything where we got to see that and got to see the Wizard Shazam I liked, but the part I didn't expect to see was the Marvel family, and I thought again that furthered the themes of the film, but it also really was not expected, and I liked the way that they looked and behaved when they were in their adult forms, and that was just nice that he was. It's kind of the opposite of one of my least favorite superhero films, Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, where it's not. It wasn't about in there. It wasn't about all four of them coming together to stop the powered up Doctor Doom with the Silver Surfer's power. It wasn't that; it was give all your powers to Johnny Storm so he can save the day. Here, it was the opposite, where you have one powerful person who shares his power, and with all of them on his side, that's how they win the day. And it's like, well, that's a much better version of that idea, and it's just nice to see how they managed to realize that idea in a way that worked.
I wonder how they're
Say
gonna.
my name, Billy.
Yeah.
No, the other one.
I wonder how they're going to go forward with the Super Family as far as sequels or things like that are concerned, or how they're going to, or if they decide to try and take it back down to just him again, how they're planning on just doing that instead of having all of them together.
Yeah, I don't know, but
it might make sense to keep them around because, from what I understand, Black Adam is pretty freaking powerful, and
yeah,
it might be useful to. Now, I'm
well,
curious.
actually,
I am curious
might be-
about one thing, and Dane, you obviously know more about the source material. The Marvel family, they all kind of each one closely took after a different one in the Justice League. Was that pretty typical for how they've been portrayed, or were they more generalized generally?
what do you mean as far as
the
the
one
Justice
girl
League?
was clearly taking after Flash, and then the one, the others,
In terms of what, personality or powers, or
powers, because like she was all about the speed, and then there was like
Freddy
the
was
one
flying.
Freddy was mostly flying. He seemed to kind of fit the Superman mold. A lot of them seem to kind of, you can make arguments for each of them as a major part of the Justice League. My understanding would be that their powers should be able to have a great deal of overlap, but I wasn't sure if that was how they were usually shown.
Well, I think that they all essentially have the same powers, but that's what I was trying to figure out, if you're talking about their personalities or their like roles or whatever. But the
I think it just depended what they stumbled on.
yeah, I think
it just depended.
I got the impression that they all had. I got the impression they all had the same Shazam powers, except like a little bit more in different directions for each character. Like the little girl, like she was a little faster. Maybe Freddy was a little bit better at flight.
and that is correct. Actually,
figured out the lightning.
Yeah.
That is
Freddie
that is that is correct, and that is correct. That certain, I'm just looking it up right now. Certain
I have to
members
admit,
of the family.
By his test, I'd probably be a villain because I would pick invisibility over flight.
Yeah, well,
do you think
oh snap! You're like a bad guy.
Well,
That's not my problem.
The various.
Do you think the Flash? Do you think Flash in any way, shape, or form?
Dave, you were breaking up there a little.
Yeah, I can.
Is the Flash related to Shazam in any way, shape, or form?
Not by relation. I mean, other than them
Been
being able to go fast. That's all that there is.
Okay.
Pretty
sure
faster, but
Dustin was right as far as certain members of the Marvel / Shazam family. Certain ones of them, their powers are like one or two powers are more emphasized than others.
Right.
But they're essentially cut from the same cloth, which makes sense. But it makes sense that they would be ever so slightly different, just because they're different people ultimately, and so they're going to focus on different things. But yeah, because that's what I understood it to be, that they essentially were cut from the same cloth. It's not like the Fantastic Four, where the cosmic rays gave them wildly different abilities, and they did not get affected the same way.
Interesting thematic note here, though. Billy spends much of the film, arguably most of the film, trying to find himself, And when he first got the thing, he didn't seem to have powers. He was just big. It was like, it was mostly because Freddie was encouraging him and goading him and like, try this and try this and try this. But all the others, they kind of fell right into it. They all just automatically had something they were good at. And I was like, that's kind of interesting if you think.
Well, they had a good role model. They had a good role model. He had to be the guinea pig there.
True.
Well, the interesting thing, just looking it up here. So we talked about like him monologuing, and he's like, "What?" We talked about that. So interestingly enough, with that, well, one of the abilities that we all know that Superman has is super hearing, and the abilities that Shazam has, like Superman obviously doesn't have the electricity powers, but Shazam, he a lot of this I think depends on who's writing it too, because with the power of Zeus, it says that it greatly enhances his other physical and mental abilities, including his five senses. And so again, I think it depends on who's writing it, because then also like with the wisdom of Solomon, he has like a vast amount of scholarly knowledge and has excellent mental acuity and everything, which I'm sure that we'll eventually get to see more of that. Because that's something that certain versions of Superman have shown him to, have a super brain basically, but other ones have gotten away from that. And I think it would be cool to see him like decipher an alien language instantly, or be able to solve a super complex equation really fast or something like that. Because that would also help him to stand out.
And one could easily make the argument there that Shazam fully understood what Savannah was saying, and he was just gaslighting him.
He could have.
Saw some of the wisdom of Solomon when he basically tricks Envy into coming out.
Yeah.
So that was my interpretation of that scene. Is that like, okay, this is his other power, because he's suddenly much more intelligent.
Yeah, I guess he knew an awful lot about the seven sins. Yes, he did.
As we discussed with Superman, I mean, the DC universe routinely resets itself over and over again. So one incarnation of, say, Superman or Shazam may be very different from another. And then when they end the world and start it over again, they'll
well, and that's why I have to put a lot of heavy asterisks next to that, because it all depends on who's writing it.
Right.
Because again, there were for both Shazam and Superman, there have been versions of them that are so powerful that like they're moving planets, and like Superman could like blow out a galaxy like a birthday candle, and it's like, well, that's too much,
Or
and
as I was painfully reminded last week, my brother's obsessed with the DC deck building game. Shazam in that game is grossly overpowered.
Yeah, which again, I kind of like the idea that he is actually more powerful than Superman, and I think you can make a lot of really good arguments as to why. Because I mean, Superman's powers are ultimately, despite him being this godlike being, they are ultimately scientifically derived relative to the fact that he's an alien on this other world and everything. And, so that carries with it its own unique sets of strengths and weaknesses. And that was honestly one of my favorite things about Man of Steel, was that they were able to establish what can hurt him besides kryptonite. And it was the atmospherics in their ship, and that sort of thing, that it was and like the kind of energy nexus that was created with the terraforming machine. It's like, that's good, because Superman is never interesting when nothing can hurt him that's not kryptonite. And that's I always like it whenever they can do other things like magic, or blocking out the sun completely, or making the sun red, or putting him like in Flashpoint. You see him like in he's all thin and frail because he's surrounded by the red sunlight, and that sort of thing. And it's like, that's always nice to see those alternative things. Whereas Shazam, like he doesn't have those usual weaknesses, and so that's a little bit more interesting on that level. But again, his big weakness is all in his mind, that he's a kid and he's not mature like Superman is, and so that carries with it its own kind of internal struggles and things. So if you write it well, I think you definitely have some good stuff to play with there.
As far as my favorite scene in this, just trying to move that forward,
Which
is the one where Dr. Savannah actually does go in there to the boardroom and kind of gets his revenge on his father and brother there. I just found that,
His brother, like, wow.
Especially at the end when they're sitting there, the guy's like trying to listen up to the doors, like, what's going on? Oh crap! And then he ends up having to.
He nopes out of there.
Yeah. I think
that was such a
I think that's one of mine, but another one is where he's lit this box on fire and he's inside, and he's trying to get him to transport from one box to the other, and he's like literally on fire. So he just runs after the kid. And I got to give credit to Jack Dylan Grazer there for his role as Freddie Freeman, because he really personifies what hero worship is, kind of, in the world of the real world. Because I mean, when you first meet him, he's got like this real bat thing, and the boomerang, and which is kind of what gets them to know that the bad guy is in Mark Strong's character, that he is actually, he does have a weakness, when the demons are out. So other than that,
do we get everybody's favorite?
It's kind of hard for me to pick like one favorite, because I just enjoy so much of this movie. Like, nobody's commented on like the crazed Santa Claus that we get, and I think I might name that.
When he's being interviewed on the news and he's like,
this was
and I bet you he gets fired. Bet you he gets fired for swearing up.
Well, there's a scene Santa's running from one of the sins, and like the little girl in like superhero mode like saves him, and he's like, "Wow, Santa, my name is Darla, and I've been really good." What? Santa is just confused. She's still.
Can you imagine if? Can you imagine if that was Billy Bob Thornton from Bad Santa?
And talking about what might have been, I was thinking about that when we were talking earlier about what might have been. Given the fact that they've openly stated that Big is the connection here, I would have loved if they'd slipped Tom Hanks in there somewhere. He even as Thad's father, or even as as the wizard passing it on or whatever. Not that I love John Glover and Javon Hunsu, but it would have been a really fun little Easter egg there.
That would have been like that would have been a third of the budget, though.
Yeah, it would have been. Yes, probably.
If they could have put the Sultan machine in like the background, like when they're at the carnival, that would have been interesting.
Right.
Well, I did like the inclusion of Superman, but without Henry Cavill's face.
Right.
Oh, that was great. Like, especially Freddy's reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently,
which, I mean, that
is how you would react. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and in its own way, it's like, well, at that time, it was sort of like up in the air as to whether he would return to the role or whatever. So, in a way, it's kind of interesting. Like, the less you see, the more in suspense you are.
It almost works better.
Apparently, for this one, it was less that and more the filming location. They couldn't fit it in with Cavill's schedule, because he's a busy dude.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
I do agree. The idea that you get this lock on, but you don't actually see his face, it almost
Yeah.
does work better. And yes, Freddy's reaction was
Well, and the S is all you need, really.
right.
Which now wasn't Henry Cavill? Wasn't he doing The Witcher at this point?
It might have been.
I think
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that. This is from 20. Is this
2019.
This is
2019.
2019. Yeah.
Oh wow, this movie is a little bit more recent than I thought.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's the most recent movie that we've actually done. So
Ever?
One of them.
yeah, ever.
I don't know
Interesting.
about ever.
Well,
Well,
it's only more interesting. It's only more recent than Spider-Verse by about 4 months, maybe.
Yeah.
So we're moving forward just a little bit at a time.
A little bit.
if I get my way and we get to do Godzilla 2019 next month,
Oh, King of the
Make
Monsters. Yeah.
yeah, make it happen, people.
I
love
do.
that.
I like I like that one better than the first of the new American Godzillas.
the first of the new Godzillas is by Gareth Edwards. It no longer counts.
Just because of that.
Now, I have to admit,
Well,
though,
comparison,
as
it's
much of
pretty
an
good.
argument as Dave made about Marvel and starting from the beginning, I think like that argument would hold at least as strongly for Godzilla. But anyway,
I agree.
the,
Well, if not more,
2014
more
is good,
strongly.
but kind of lackluster.
Well,
Anyway.
it was a we think we can movie.
now I will admit, if we end up with Shin Godzilla, I would love for an excuse to watch my copy.
That would be
But anyway,
Me too.
yeah.
I saw that on the big screen.
Oh, I wish I had. I've seen it, but not on the big screen.
That must
Oh
be
yeah,
on the big screen.
It was so worth it. It was so worth it. It was like a 2-day Fathom event thing and select theaters, and you could choose to see it in the original Japanese or dubbed. And I chose the original Japanese because dubbing very rarely works, as far as I can tell. But I saw it that way, and there were like it wasn't like a packed house like a normal, conventional movie, but like there were well, but there were enough Godzilla fans there that were like clearly fans with the shirts and everything. They were decked out, and they were clearly like actually like invested in the movie, which is what you should be when you're going to see those kinds of things. You got to represent, and they most definitely were, and that was a very, very good movie, number one, but it was a good experience because the people that were there, they weren't just your average everyday, yokels. They were they really believed in the movie, and it's like that's good, because
right.
I'm certainly someone that I really hate like fanboyism and toxic fandom. I really hate that, but like when it's working the way it's supposed to work, which is the devotion, the love, the dedication, the all that stuff, when it's working, there's nothing better. And so that was a good example of how that can work.
Good deal. All right. Do we
Well, shall we
Ready.
shall we wrap up in time for
let's go do Darkman.
All right.
Yeah.
So, are we doing the save outros for the other one?
Who wants to start?
Well, I'm Dustin, also known as the Crypt of Horrors. I collect anything related to horror in Milwaukee.
So, ladies and gentlemen,
and
go ahead.
I was just going. I thought we were doing it. And you can find me on my YouTube at the Crypt of Horrors and my Instagram at the Crypt of Horrors. That's the short version.
Yeah. Short version, Dane Kyle, aka Dane Damerung on YouTube, on Indie Horror Film Creative, where I do a show called Blu-ray Views, unbox a lot of stuff, movie collecting. I'm a filmmaker as well, but we'll get into that more in the next podcast episode.
Okay. Septum?
Septum Ascend versus the World. We cover physical media. If you like physical media, join us on our channel.
And I'm Kotobuki Jake. I do join the channel on a regular basis, and as some of the others here have been joining us for certain videos lately, which is nice, but we covered quite a lot of media. Dave?
Alrighty, and I'm David Strege. I am a founding father of Inside Movies Galore, which will be shortly joining. And I also moonlight under Delusions of Grandeur. Check out my my video reviews and video uploads of videos I pick up. So thank you. Have a great day, evening, and morning wherever you are, and all powers that be have hope wherever you are.
All right.
Indeed.
Oh, and we are to be going on about Dark Stand shortly. So
Mhm.
Right.
join us on our channel on Inside Movies.
All right.
Like, share.